Hey y'all, welcome back to Fruit Friday. I'm your host Maddie, or Yajai in Thai, and today we are talking about the identity crisis that often follows a big move abroad and how to bridge the gap between your old self and your new self. But before we get into that, this is Fruit Friday, of course, so we have to talk about our fruit. This week's fruit is guava, and personally, I am a big fan. I think guava doesn't get enough love. It's delicious as a fruit, it's delicious as a juice. There's just nothing I don't love about it. You can get white guava like this, but there's also a pink guava. I think this one's my favorite. I love when it's crunchy on the outside and soft and squishy on the inside, but you have to be careful of the seeds because they will hurt your teeth. Delicious. The reason I chose guava for this episode is because the word for guava in Thai is farang, and farang is also the word for foreigner. And I think foreigner becomes part of your identity when you move to a new country, and this can present its own set of challenges. And so that's what I want to talk about in today's episode.
It's Fruit Friday, yeah, let's take a bite. Life's sweet and sour, take it slice by slice. Humor, heart, and wisdom, served just right. Laughing, learning, loving too. Fruit Friday's here with the juice for you.
Now, believe it or not, this is probably the 7th time I have tried to film this episode because I think today's topic is just so complex and it is so difficult to articulate in a way that is truly reflective of the experiences that I've had while also resonating with you. And so I just want to preface this episode by saying if you have questions or you would like to expand on this conversation, or if you've had different experiences that don't necessarily align with what I'm going to share in this episode, please leave a comment. Please send me a message. I would love to continue the conversation. Obviously, as a podcast, this is very one-sided. I'm talking and you're listening, and I so appreciate you being here for that. But I don't want this to feel like I have all the answers and my experience is the only experience. So please, if you have something to contribute to this discussion, I would love to have that and to share that with you. But with that being said, let's dive into today's topic. So as I was gathering my thoughts on this episode and thinking about how I wanted to deliver the material, I had to do a lot of thinking about the concept of identity and what makes up our identity. And I think there are different factors that contribute to a person's identity, and some of them are internal and some of them are external. And one of the questions I really found myself asking was how much of my identity comes from how I perceive myself and how I feel, and how much of my identity comes from the way others perceive me, and which parts of my identity would I no longer identify with if other people were not able to perceive them. And I don't necessarily have answers for this or want to share answers for this, but it is just a question that I think is very interesting to ponder because, as I said, identity is really complex and there are so many things that contribute to our identity. And there are things that people can identify us without having to know us very well. And then there are other parts of our identity that people don't know unless they truly get to know us or we show them to them. And when I think about my own identity, I think there are layers, and I think again, this could resonate with a lot of people. I think we all have a similar structure when it comes to how we identify. But I think we have like an outer identity, an outer layer that is observable by strangers. People can look at us and they can define certain characteristics that identify who we are. So this could be things like hair color, skin color, eye color, the build of your body, your height, the way you dress, like your physical appearance. And I think this is all very surface level, but it does have an impact on our identity. And some of us might look physically how we feel on the inside, and some of us might not look exactly how we feel on the inside. And again, this is why the topic is so complex. But then I think below the physical layer, the outer layer of identity, we have more of this internal identity, and this can be defined by so many things. It can be defined by the relationships that we have. You know, we can identify as a daughter or a sister or a mother. We can identify as our occupation. Maybe we're a teacher or we're a doctor or we are a designer, we're creative, we're a chef, whatever it is. Like that can be part of your identity. We can also define ourselves and identify ourselves as friends, as good listeners, as compassionate, as caring, as advocates for initiatives that we care a lot about. Like all of those things can contribute to our identity. Our hobbies can contribute to our identity. I'm a dancer, I'm a runner, I'm a weightlifter, like I'm active. That is a very strong part of my identity, and not necessarily someone would know about me just if they saw me walking down the street. I mean, maybe a little bit because of my build, but like these internal parts of our identity are not necessarily things people can perceive about us unless they know us well, but that doesn't mean they're not part of who we are. And I think as adults, we have a fairly strong sense of identity. We know who we are, we know the experiences that have shaped us, and we hold our identity close because it makes us who we are. And the reason I want to talk about identity, and the reason I think identity is so important, is because it's tied to love. And what I mean by that is I think everyone has a deep desire to be loved. I think regardless of who you are or where you live, we all share that desire to be loved. And the only way to be loved, to truly be loved, is to be known and to be seen exactly as we are, because people aren't really able to love us unless they know us. And this ties back to identity, because when people are able to perceive us in a way that reflects how we perceive ourselves, only then are they truly able to love us. And so the crisis that can come with this can be twofold. I think internally, if we struggle to know ourselves and we don't quite know our own identity, then it's impossible for anyone else to really love us, because, like we're not even certain who we are. So how can they know who we are? And externally, there's another crisis that comes when people are not able to perceive you in a way that you perceive yourself. And the gap there can cause a little bit of friction. And that can be another version of this crisis. And I think both of these crises, while they can happen to anyone at any time, can sometimes be amplified when you move abroad. And I want to talk about my experiences with that. So let's dive in. We're going to start with the internal identity crisis that you face when you move abroad, and then we'll jump into the external a little bit later in this episode. So starting with the internal. As I said at the beginning of this episode, when you move abroad, when you move to a new country, you get a new layer added to your identity, a new label that wasn't there before, and that label is foreigner. And I think I want to start this section by telling you a little bit of a story about the first time that I realized that this was now part of my identity. So I did my study abroad program in Bali, as I've told you all before. And then after, I wanted to travel for a little bit more in Indonesia. So I went to Java and I had a few days to explore. And one of the things I really wanted to do was to visit Borobudur, which is this ancient, beautiful, historic temple. And it's best at sunrise. So I hired a private driver to take me there. He brought me there really early in the morning. It was really quiet. And I was just walking around enjoying all of the beautiful scenery and the hand carvings and the stone and just the history and the energy of the place. It was honestly breathtaking. And then as more people started to show up, because this is a popular tourist destination, a man stopped me and he was like, sorry, photo. And he was there with his wife and kids and aunties and, a group, whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, of course I'll take a photo for you. So I tried to take his phone from him. As I tried to take the phone, he's like, no, photo. And I was like, yeah, photo. Okay, like, give me your phone. He's like, no. I was like, what? Like, how am I supposed to take the photo if you don't give me your phone? So then I take out my phone and I'm like, okay, I'll try to take a photo on my phone. And he's like, no, photo. And I'm like, sir, I don't understand what you want. And then he starts to kind of push me backwards. And I realized that he was trying to take a photo of me with his family, which I thought, okay, this is a bit weird. Like, we're in this beautiful, ancient, historic temple and I'm the photo op. Strange, but like, okay. So I take a photo with him, with his family, and they're all very sweet. And they're like, thank you so much. I'm like, yeah, bye. But then another family had seen me stop for this photo. So then they come over and they ask me for a photo. And I'm like, I've already said yes once and now I have to say yes again. So I take my selfie with them and I'm like, yeah, smile, hi, thank you. Next thing I know, there is a queue of people lining up to take a photo with me, as if I'm some sort of celebrity, like 10, 15 people just queuing to take a photo with me. And I was so overwhelmed and freaked out. I ended up just like pushing past them all and running out of this temple back to my taxi. And I was like, take me back to the hotel. I am done here. But I just remember that day was kind of the first time that I realized that now being a foreigner was a new part of my identity. It was the first thing that people perceived about me in this space. I want to be really careful to not sound like, oh, white girl discovers being a minority for the first time. Because like I know that this is an experience that many people have had at various phases of their life. But it really was, for me, my first time, other than maybe being the only girl on a football team, that I experienced being the minority in a space. Because I grew up in a really small white town. No one did a double take when I walked into any room, okay? Like, I am very average height. I'm a very average looking person. Like, there's nothing special about the way that I look. And so this moment in Java was really the first time that I felt like, oh my God, like, because of the way that I look and because of this outer layer of my identity, it's now like a defining factor of who I am and how I'm showing up in this world. And the same thing happened when I moved to Thailand, a few less photo ops here. But I think when you move to a foreign country, as I said, your identity is stripped down to being a foreigner. And all those other pieces of your identity that you hold really close and you really identify with become less visible because people just see the surface. They don't know you. So all they can do is make a judgment based on how you look. And when you are different, when you are the minority in a place, like a new piece of your identity becomes that. It becomes you're a foreigner, you're different, you don't belong here. And I think this experience is something that anyone in a minority group faces, like the experience of having all other parts of your identity stripped and you just become this one thing. And I think that can come with different challenges and have different resulting implications depending on the group, the minority group that you're part of and the space that you're showing up in. And I definitely don't want to say that my experience as a white woman in Asia is the same as that of, you know, a trans woman in a bathroom or a black man like in the US, you know, like in those situations, they're also being identified solely by like a physical observable characteristic, and the rest of their identity seemingly doesn't matter to large groups of people, but it's definitely different than what I've experienced. And again, I'm not trying to like minimize or say mine is the same or mine's harder, because it's definitely not. I think being a white woman in Asia comes with a lot more privilege than many minority groups, but that is a conversation for a different day and besides the point that I'm trying to make here. But to bring it back to this new label of foreigner, I think when part of your identity becomes being a foreigner, you are faced with the stereotypes and the prejudice that comes with that label. And so I think, again, I want to tell a little bit of a story because it helps to explain what I mean by this. Because since living in Thailand, I've been here almost 7 years now, I have realized that Thai people are quite prejudiced. And I don't want to say that in a way that makes them seem like they're bad people. I think I myself have become more prejudiced since living in Thailand. And again, I know that sounds bad, but let me tell you a story, so hear me out. When I first moved here, I had some Thai friends that would make comments that I would definitely side-eye. They would say things like, I hate Chinese people. Chinese people are the worst. Or, ugh, I hate Indian tourists. I hate Indians. They're so annoying. They're so loud. They're the worst. And again, my initial reaction is like covering their mouth like, whoa, 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 whoa. You can't say that. Like, watch your mouth. What do you, like, how can you be comfortable saying that out loud type of stuff? But then I started to realize that they hadn't been exposed to the same level of diversity that I had. And so their perceptions of these groups of people were based on a very, very niche example. And, you know, when I think about my own experience with these groups of people living in the US, you know, there are many Chinese immigrants, there are many Chinese tourists, I had Chinese classmates, I had Chinese professors. I interacted with Chinese people in so many different settings and so many different scenarios that it wasn't so easy to kind of cluster them into one group, you know, because I knew many people who were Chinese, but the Chinese stereotype just didn't fit because I had been exposed to such a diverse group of Chinese people. And the same goes for Indian populations, you know, like I had Indian doctors, I had Indian customers when I worked at a restaurant, I had Indian roommate, I had Indian friends, I made out with an Indian guy at a bar, like, and of course, I don't see all these people as just one stereotypical group. I had very different interactions and relationships with all of them. And because I was exposed to such a diverse group of people, it was not my default to lump them into one group under one stereotype. But my friends in Thailand had a very different experience. What I've realized living in a tourist destination is it's oftentimes a very, very specific type of person from a country that has the ability and the desire to travel to these tourist hotspots. And that group of people gets even smaller when you're talking about the types of people that can come and stay at these very luxury resorts where my friends had been working. So again, my friends who were working in these 4-star, 5-star hotels were only exposed to a very, very niche group of Indian tourists or a very, very niche group of Chinese tourists. And those people in those niche groups had established a reputation that, you know, created a certain stereotype. And I don't think my friends were wrong for having these judgments about these groups of people because they'd only been exposed to this very, very niche group of them. And I think I've fallen victim to the same thing living in Thailand. There are certain people from certain countries, and I'm not going to drop the names of the countries on this podcast because I don't want to start that fight in my comments, but I definitely notice that there are certain types of people from certain areas that come to Thailand and they have earned themselves a reputation here, and it's really hard to not fall into the trap of like believing the stereotypes when there are so many manifestations of the stereotypes like here showing you why they exist in the first place. And I'm not going to get too much into that. I think if you have been to Thailand, you know, but the reason that that is important to be aware of is because when you come as a foreigner and you are here, you are also lumped into that group. You are lumped into that stereotype. People are going to look at you and have perceptions about who you are and what you're doing here and how you're going to treat people and how they should treat you. And even if you don't fall into the stereotypes, you're going to have to challenge them with every interaction that you have. And I think this contributes to the identity crisis that I want to talk about. Because when you walk into a space as a foreigner, people are going to treat you differently than they would treat a local person. I can physically see people's demeanor change from kind of cold and standoffish to like really friendly and inviting the second I start speaking Thai. And I think Thai people in general are very friendly, but it just goes to another level when they realize that I'm not just the foreigner that they had originally seen me as. There have been so many times that I have like walked into a restaurant and it's a very Thai restaurant. There's no English menu and I can see the panic on people's faces when they're like, oh my God, what is she going to order? She's not going to be able to read the menu and we can't explain it to her. And then once I rattle off my order in Thai, they're like, huge wave of relief comes over their face. They're very smiley, very open, very welcoming, extra friendly. And like that fear disappears. But the fear was initially there just because of how I looked. And the same thing goes when I would go into market stalls, you know, like I would walk in and they would peg me as a foreigner. They're going to give me a certain price. They're going to give me a certain type of customer service. And then once I started speaking Thai, they just opened up, become much more, I don't know, friendly and talkative and offering me discounts, offering me extra things. And it's just a different type of interaction. And these are the types of things that you have to experience every day. And while I do love when people compliment my Thai and ask me questions about how long I've been here and, you know, like tell me I'm a Thai person at heart, the fact that they make those comments and the fact that that's always the start of the conversation is a constant reminder that I don't totally belong here. And I think that is part of the identity crisis, like the feeling of never truly belonging in this place that I want to call my home. And when you move abroad and you want to have a home in another country, I think when you arrive, you are immediately pushed into a building phase. And what you build is up to you, but I think everyone starts by building one of two things. They either build bridges or they build walls. And what you decide to build is going to have a huge impact on how you are perceived by the people that are surrounding you. So the mistake that many people make, and what I don't recommend you do, is to build walls. Because when you build walls, you close yourself off from connection. You double down on this new label of being the foreigner, being the other. And you make it harder to kind of fit into this new place. And building walls can look like many things. Building walls can look like saying no to things because they're unfamiliar and refusing to leave your comfort zone. Building walls can be declining invitations because you don't think something is going to be your thing, or you don't think you're going to connect with someone. Building walls can be really being exclusive about how you spend your time and who you spend your time with. And I'm not saying that it's bad to connect with people from your same home country or your same background, your same culture, because that is a great way to find community and belonging, especially when you're really far from home. But if you're exclusive about it and you don't welcome in diversity in other groups, like, you are closing yourself off and you are really othering yourself in a place where you're already the other. Some people build walls by polarizing every interaction, every situation. They say things like, oh my God, that would never happen in my country, or oh, I would never do that because that's not how I do things, or can you imagine if someone tried to do this where I'm from? Because you're in a completely different place, and like the systems and the history and the culture behind why things are done the way they're done, they're different. It's not really a comparison situation, but these are all ways that people intentionally or unintentionally build walls around them. And what I recommend you do instead of building walls is building bridges. And we've talked about this in previous episodes, so I'm not going to go too far into it. But building bridges can be asking questions, trying to learn as much as you can, making an effort to learn the language, trying new foods, accepting invitations, trying and failing and trying again and apologizing where you're wrong and doing better the next time. There are so many ways to build your bridges and to build connections with people. And I think regardless of what you choose to build, whether you are building walls or you're building bridges, you are also rebuilding your perceivable identity, because as people get to know you in this new space, however it is that you're showing up, whether it's with a very open heart in mind or a very closed heart in mind, people are forming opinions about you. People are forming an understanding of who you are. And again, what you choose to build and how you choose to show up in this space is going to have a very positive or a very negative impact on the rest of your experiences. And regardless of what you build, again, part of your identity is still always going to be foreigner. People are always going to look at you and see a foreigner first. And while having this become a strong part of your identity can be a challenge and it has to be something you adjust to, it's definitely not the biggest part of the identity crisis that I've faced moving abroad, because being othered in a place where you are not native to and feeling like an outsider in a country that you're not from is kind of expected. It's not surprising. But what was unexpected for me, and what has been the bigger challenge, is feeling like the other when I return home. And that is kind of where the external identity crisis comes in. And that's the next thing that I want to talk about, because this has been a much larger challenge for me. And I think something that a lot of people don't anticipate having to face. And so it can kind of catch you off guard when it happens. Now, I think as we move through our lives, as we grow up, as we have new experiences, we are constantly evolving. And this happens to everyone everywhere, regardless of where you live, whether you live abroad or you stay in your home country your whole life. You are going to evolve and change as your life goes on. And at the same time, I think when you move abroad, the speed at which you evolve and the direction you evolve in is so much different. It's so much faster, and it strays so far from the evolution that happens to people who never leave their home country. And I'm not saying this in a way that is to say that you're better and you become better than everyone when you move abroad. That is not what I'm saying at all, but it is very different. And I didn't realize how significant this change was until I started coming home and realizing how far I had strayed from an older version of myself. And I think if we zoom out and look at, evolution on a macro scale, like, of course, we're going to evolve differently in a different place because we are shaped by our environments. We are shaped by our surroundings. And if we look at the history of evolution from a very scientific standpoint, people and all living things have evolved so differently in different parts of the world because they were exposed to different environmental factors. And so it's just expected that you're going to evolve differently if you are existing in a different part of the world. And it's really easy to evolve alongside of people who are existing in the same environments. And so when you move to a new country and maybe you make new friends and become part of new communities, your communities can evolve in the same direction because you're all experiencing the same things. But because you left many people in your home country to evolve in their own ways with different groups of people and under different environmental factors, like, you're evolving in very different directions. And a lot of times, if they don't change their location, they evolve at a much slower pace than you're evolving in your new location, just because you're exposed to so many more opportunities for learning and challenging and growing and expanding and experiencing. And again, not saying that one is better than the other, but it's just very different. And so when you come back, oftentimes the people that you're coming back to meet, they are remembering an older version of you and you are remembering an older version of them. And then suddenly there's kind of this gap between your old identity and your new identity. And this can be challenging for a variety of reasons. First of all, as I said earlier, one of the things that defines our identity is our relationships. And oftentimes, if we evolve away from certain relationships and then we come back and that relationship is no longer present in our life in the same way it was before, like that can cause some discomfort, that can contribute to this sense of identity crisis internally. And the external part of this identity crisis is now that you've gone off and evolved and changed and hopefully transformed into an even better version of yourself than you were before, when you come back, people don't know this new version of you. And that can be kind of the external identity crisis because people are no longer able to perceive you in the way that you perceive yourself. And I know for me personally, I have evolved and changed so much since I moved to Thailand. And I think I would have evolved and changed in many ways regardless of where I would have moved to. But Thailand specifically, I think, has made me much more laid back and also much healthier than I was in the US for a variety of reasons. And honestly, I could fill a whole episode with the ways that I've evolved and changed in Thailand, and I think I might in the future, so I'm not going to go too far into it today. But I know that the version of myself that I've become living in Thailand is very different from the version of myself that I was when I was fresh out of college, and that many of my friends and family said goodbye to when I left. And so when I came home for the first time, and when I continue to come home as these newer, evolved versions of me, it feels like I have to reintroduce myself every time because the version of me that people are remembering is no longer exists. And the same can be true about the people that I come home to. You know, like many of them have gone through their own transformative journeys and situations, be it because of new relationships or relationships ending or having a child or getting a new job or like family dynamics changing. And it's tricky when you come home and you're remembering an older version of someone is remembering an older version of you, because once the excitement of the reunion fades, you can sometimes feel like you're sitting across a chasm rather than sitting across the table from someone because there's just so much unknown. And I think in those moments, much like you face when you move to a new country, you are faced with an opportunity to build. And in that moment, you have to choose if you want to build a wall or a bridge. And in this case, I think it's up to you what you want to build. I think in some cases, it's important to build walls, and in other cases, it's important to build bridges. And when you move to a new country, obviously, my thought is don't build your walls, build your bridges and connect. But when you come home, I think it's a little bit more up to you to decide, because sometimes when you come back, people are not willing or ready or able to accept and love and get to know the new version of you. And in these cases, it's okay to build your walls. It's okay to set your boundaries. It's okay to say, I've evolved past this relationship or this friendship or this community. And again, it's not necessarily saying that you're too good for them or you're better than them, but it's saying an older version of me fit into this space and this new version of me doesn't belong here. And it's okay to build your walls. It's okay to set your boundaries and to not reconnect in those ways. But I think more often than not, we do have a desire to reconnect. We do have a desire to bridge that gap and to introduce people that we love to this new version of ourselves. Because as I said, we all have a deep desire to be loved and we want to be known truly for who we are. And in those cases, we want the people that we love to see us, see this new version of us, and to be able to celebrate it and to be able to know it and to be able to love it. And I have some strategies for how to bridge that gap and how to bring people closer to knowing this new and evolved version of you that we'll talk about at the end of this episode. But first, I want to circle back to the core of this identity crisis and the great paradox that is, as you become connected to more and more people all over the world, the fewer people will ever truly know you. And I think this is kind of the thought that haunts me and that the idea that sits at the center of my identity crisis, because the question I start asking myself is, if no one will ever truly know who I am, will I ever truly be loved? Or will I just like have to sit with this loneliness and this feeling that like no one is ever going to fully understand all that I have experienced and all that I have become because of everything that I am? And this is, again, a complicated topic to discuss because there are so many variables and so many elements and so many different ways that people experience this feeling. But to shrink it down a little bit, I think everyone faces this to a certain extent on a very small scale. Even when you live in your home country, you have different versions of yourself that exist in different spaces. You have a version of you that exists when you're alone. You have a version of yourself that exists with your friends. You have a version that exists with your family and your siblings or your parents. You have a version that exists at work. And there are very few people that ever get to see you in all of those different spaces and to know every version of yourself. And the people that do have the privilege to be able to see you in all those spaces and to love every version of you are the people that you hold close and that you like truly feel loved by, and the people that you truly love. And when you move abroad, when you live in another country, it is so much harder to find someone and to have someone that is able to see you and know you in all of these different spaces. Because now not only do you have a different personality for work and friends and family, you have like different personalities or different versions of yourself in different worlds. And, you know, you have your people at home who knew you growing up. They know about your family and your friends and your community and the culture that contributed to who you are. But they really struggle to imagine what your life is like in this place that they've never been. And on the flip side, all of the people that you're close with in the country that you moved to, all of your friends and your community here, most of them, if not all of them, have no idea about where you grew up and what you experienced there and how those experiences shaped you and contributed to who you are. And in both of these scenarios, you can try your best to explain, you can try your best to share stories, but there's really no way to truly understand unless they are able to experience you in that world. Because there's just too much context missing, you know? Like, my friends in Thailand don't know that I grew up in a really small town on a farm and I lived on the same street as my whole family. But also, even if I explain that to them, they don't really even, it's hard for them to grasp what that really means and to understand how that contributed to the way that I was raised and who I am as a person. And people that I love at home have a really, really hard time understanding what my life is like in Thailand and how the Thai culture and how the community that I have in Thailand has shaped me and contributed to who I am now. And I think what I'm describing here is very similar to what many immigrants describe as a third culture. And again, much like with identity and having your identity stripped to one definable characteristic, I think the third culture experience can be very different for different groups of people, and it comes with different challenges and different implications depending on who you are and where you are. And again, I'm not trying to say that my third culture experience is exactly the same or it's easier or harder than anyone else's, but I'm trying to put words to it because I hope that will resonate with you. And what a third culture is, for those that aren't familiar, is this idea that you're not fully accepted in a space where you grow up. So in the case of like many immigrant children, they grow up in a country that their parents are not native to. Their parents immigrated, but they never fully feel like they belong in this place because everyone in this country identifies them as different, you know, like they're an immigrant, they're not from there, there's something different about them. But then when they go back to their country of origin, whether to visit or move, they're never totally accepted there either because they didn't grow up there. Maybe they don't speak the language, maybe they don't totally fit into the culture. And so also in this place, they are othered once again because it's like they're different, they don't fit in, they don't quite belong here. And then they exist somewhere in the middle. And while this was not my experience growing up, and I didn't grow up in an immigrant household, I do think that I can relate to this third culture idea in a sense that I no longer feel like I totally belong in either place. I don't totally feel like I belong in the US, and I don't totally feel like I belong in Thailand, and there's just this third space that I exist in. And I think that is something that you kind of sign up for when you move abroad, especially if you want to move abroad for a long term, because As I said, you're always going to be a foreigner in the place that you're moving to, but as you grow and evolve and change into a new version of yourself, you also kind of start to not fit into the place that you're from. And so that can create its own challenge and, struggle. Now, if at the core of this identity crisis is the question of, will I ever truly be known? Will I ever truly be loved? I think the answer is yes, it's possible if you are willing to show people all of your worlds. And what that boils down to is, are you willing to open up? Are you willing to do the extra work that it takes to introduce people to every version of yourself and to help them to understand? And obviously, you can't force this on just anyone, but I think the people that do want to love you and do want to understand you and do want to truly know you will be happy to receive these things as long as you're able to deliver them in a way that they can connect to. And so, with that, I want to offer some of my best strategies for bridging the gap. Now, the reason I think many people fail at this is because they do a poor job at delivering their stories and experiences that have been transformative for them, because they do it in a way that other people can't necessarily relate to. I think we've all seen the memes on social media about like your friend who goes abroad one time and then won't shut up about their trip for the rest of their life, or your friend who like makes traveling their personality and just, speaks a different language on accident, or, like is constantly talking about the things they got in certain places. And while I understand why this can sometimes be annoying or difficult for people to relate to when they don't have any of these experiences to connect with, I don't like the idea that we should just like not talk about our travel and not talk about our experiences, because traveling and the experiences that we have while doing so are really powerful and they can really transform us. And personally, when my friends travel, I want to hear everything. I want to know everything they ate. I want to know everything they saw. I want to know about every interaction with every local that changed the way they see the world. And again, I think the mistake people make is delivering this in a way that is not relatable. So if I could give you some tips for bridging the gap and tips for introducing people to your other worlds, the other places that you exist and call home, do it in one of these ways. I think the easiest way, and the way that I find myself doing most often, is through physical items. Because I think when there is a physical item that can be used as a launch pad for conversation that can spark people's curiosity and kind of allow them to experience the thing that you are talking about, it makes the conversation and the understanding just like so much deeper and so much easier to approach. And this doesn't have to be expensive physical items or fancy things. It can be the simplest, smallest things that just act as a launch pad for conversation. So when I come back from Thailand, I love to bring little Thai convenience store items, things like Thai herbal inhalers, snacks, textiles, beauty products, like things that are small that I use every day that people wouldn't have seen before. And then I can use that as a conversation starter and a way to spark their curiosity so that they want to ask questions and they want to get to know more. And this isn't always the most exciting, and you can only do this so many times, but it is a way to start the conversation and to get people initially interested. Another thing that I really like to do is to connect over food. I love to bring ingredients back, both ingredients from the US to Thailand or ingredients from Thailand back to the US, and to cook a meal that may or may not be significant. Maybe it might be for a special holiday, or it might just be for any day of the week. But just connecting over food is such a fun way to introduce people to another world and to get them, again, to open up, to ask questions, to understand and to spark their curiosity, and maybe understand a little bit more about why you love a place, or what's special about a place, or what's special about the events that surround that meal. And if talking and telling stories seems like too much effort for you and not something that you want to do or someone is open to receiving, try connecting through movies or games. Try showing them a TV show or a series or something that is representative of that culture and tells a cool story through the perspective of someone else, and maybe just helps them understand a little bit more about the world that you're now living in. Because again, I think when there's context around your experiences and when they can kind of start to see and understand for themselves the things that you have experienced, it closes the gap between you. It helps them understand a little bit more what you're talking about and what all these stories mean. And while I think all of this can be really powerful and a really fun way to connect and close that gap, there is absolutely nothing that does more for closing the gap and allowing people to see and understand you fully than having visitors. I haven't had many visitors in Thailand. I've had a couple of friends visit, which was really fun. But the most special visitors I had were my mom and a group of her friends, and then my sister and a group of her friends. Two separate trips, but unforgettable experiences and things that I think really brought me closer to both of them. When I first moved abroad, I think a lot of people were thinking, like, how long is she going to be gone? Why does she want to be so far away from home? What's so special about Thailand anyway? And it's hard to answer those questions, and I get it, and I understand why that is the narrative in your head. And it's really hard to explain to people when they've never experienced a place for themselves. And so when my sister and when my mom were able to come here and to see my life here, and to see how happy I was and how great my community was, I feel like it really took us from here to here in understanding. Like, it just felt like it brought us closer because they were able to really see what I love about this place and what makes this place special and how it holds me in such a special way. And I can remember specifically when my sister was here, one day in particular that stood out because I can share stories about how Thai people are kind and generous and lovely, and I just love being in a world that I feel safe and I don't have to worry about crime or people trying to take advantage of me or like being mistreated. Like, I can explain that, but it's hard for them to understand without experiencing it. And I think my sister and her friends got really lucky. I mean, not lucky, this is a pretty normal experience, I would say, but I was so touched by this one day that we were traveling because we were going to take the overnight train from Hua Hin to Surat Thani, and I had to go run some errands, and I had left them at a coffee shop with all of their luggage, and then we were going to go to the train station after that. And while they were at the coffee shop and while I was running my errands, it started downpouring, and it was rainy season, so it was raining and raining and raining, and the rain was not letting up, and the streets were flooded, and the coffee shop that they were at had closed, but the woman obviously didn't want to just kick them out into the street, so she just let them hang out there, and she stayed as well, obviously, because she didn't want to kick them out and make them be outside in the rain. And when I got there, this is now probably an hour after the shop had closed, and I explained to her that we needed to get to the train station. We were going to take the overnight train, and she packed all of our stuff into her car and drove us there herself, unprompted. You know, like, we could have found a taxi, we could have organized a song tao, we could have figured it out in another way, but she just, like, so kindly did that for us, and my sister and her friends were so touched by that. And then after we had taken the overnight train, we had to wait at the bus station in Surat Thani to get the bus to the pier and then the ferry to the island. And while we were at the bus station, we had about an hour to probably wait, so I suggested we go to the nearby coffee shop and sit down and have a coffee. And the family that owned the shop were sitting there having their lunch, and so they had just, kind of prepared a few dishes family style, and we sat down next to them, and I ordered coffee for all of my sister's friends because I could speak Thai, so, I'm ordering on behalf of them, and the family was obviously very surprised that I could speak Thai. And so we got to talking, and they were asking, like, how long have I been here and if I like to eat Thai food. And of course I told them yes. And then they said, can you eat this? And they were eating stir-fried curry snails, which is not something that foreigners usually eat. And I'd say most Thai people have probably not seen a foreigner enjoying a dish like that. So when I said that I could eat it and I would be willing to try, they got so excited. And so I took one of the snails out, and, you'd open it up and suck it out, and they thought that was so fun and great, and they were overjoyed to see that. And then they offered my sister's friends if they wanted to try, and instead of just like passing them one on a spoon or on a little toothpick, these people got out more plates, put rice on all the plates, and gave the containers of food that they were eating out of to my sister and her friends. Like, put them out on our table, literally gave them the food that they were eating. Like, they didn't have any more. They were just like, you please eat, please enjoy. And my sister and her friends were so, so touched by that and just could not believe the generosity and the kindness from these complete strangers. And I feel like in that moment, she really understood, like, I see what you mean about the people here just being so kind and so loving, and how you feel cared for, even as, like, as a foreigner and as a stranger. And I feel like that really brought us closer together, and it deepened her understanding of me and my desire to live in this place. The same thing happened when my mom was visiting with her friends, I think on multiple occasions. It was her and all of her friends' first time in Asia, many of their first experience leaving the country. And I was just so proud of them for being so open-minded and so willing to try so many new things. And it was so special to be able to see my mom fall in love with so many of the things that I love about Thailand for herself. and also for her to be able to see my house and to meet my friends and see my community, because then it felt like when I told her stories, she was no longer having to imagine these things in this imaginary world that she'd never been. It was like she was really imagining and understanding what I meant when I told her I was meeting with my friends or going to this place or doing this thing, because she had experienced it for herself. And again, I think it just like really bridged the gap. It really deepened her understanding of me, and it made me feel more loved, because I was like, now I feel more seen for who I am in this new world. And now I feel like there are more people who know me and know all versions of me. And I think that is really special. So if you have the opportunity to have visitors, I think that is one of the best ways to bridge the gap. I know that hosting visitors can be a lot of energy and effort. It is really, really hard to be someone's translator, to be someone's travel planner, to make sure that everyone has what they need and everyone's having a good time. And especially if people have special accommodation needs or special requests or whatever it is, like, it is exhausting to have visitors, and you can't do it for just anyone. But I think when you're able to host people that mean a lot to you and people that you love and you want to be loved and known by, it is always, always worth the effort, and it is just so special. And so on that note, I want to leave you with a little bit of fruit for thought. This week, I want you to think about what you would put on the itinerary of a trip if you were going to host a visitor. And this could be a visitor from your home country coming to the new country that you're living, or it could be a visitor from the new country that you're living coming to visit you at home. Either way, I want you to think about what types of things you would want them to see or experience that would better help them understand you and who you are as a person. So like, what types of things would you want them to see and them to experience that would bring you closer together? I want you to think about that this week. And I want you to come back and join me next week, because speaking of going home, we are going to be talking all about the experience of going home for the first time or all the times that follow that, and the things that come with it that I had no idea were going to be challenges, including the reverse culture shock, the changing relationships, and also the kind of sense of obligation you get when you go home. Lots to unpack there. So don't forget to come back and join me next time. But until then, if you like this podcast, please like it, follow us on whatever platform you are streaming, share it with someone that you think would like it too, leave a comment, continue the conversation, share it on your stories, literally any sort of engagement I am so, so thankful for. And I just also want to thank you for being here and showing up to listen, because I think my ability to speak on these topics that mean so much to me are doing a lot for my own sense of identity and being able to exist in this world and to be seen and truly understood and known exactly as I am. So thank you so much for listening. I am truly overjoyed by your support, and I can't wait to see you next week. Until then, happy Friday.
Take one last bite of that juicy slice. Fruit for thought, sounding oh so nice. Human heart of wisdom, served just right. Laughing, learning, loving too. Fruit Friday's here with the juice for you.